This is an attempt at a universal metaphor. I've raised the camera up a little bit so that Dave Leacock could see. In spiral dynamics, which is a theory of psychological value system development, Claire W. Gray has argued that there is a six pattern in the universe of development. However, when he talks about this, he says that the mental development is actually the first major pattern of it. What I'm trying to argue here is that the mental pattern of six is actually the third 6-on-6 stage. There's something else going on that confused me for a little while, and I'm calling it collapses, and I'll try to explain that as we go. But what happens with this 6-on-6 stage is we actually get a map. And the map pops out as a fractal, in my opinion, or a holonic fractal. And the subject of one stage, it becomes the object of the subject of the next stage. And this process is, in a certain sense, arbitrarily broke up into 6 stages. But I think in another sense, those 6 stages are very good as sort of stop points or particles for which one can sort of metaphorically understand the old whole universal map. And so in this sense, I can actually try to place what this map is pointing towards, whether or not it's exactly right. And I don't think it is. I think that there is still a lot of things to be ironed out here, of geometries to be created. But it's a map that's trying to create meaning, an integrative meaning system that allows us to have a systemic view of reality to some extent. And so the first 6 stages in Graves' system, the first tier is what he calls it, are beige, purple, red, blue, orange, and green. And he uses those 6 colors sort of in an arbitrary sense, in the sense that the colors in his mind don't really point to anything in particular. However, there's a few patterns that he points out. One is that for example, beige and purple, with beige we move from sort of an I sense to purple sort of a we sense. Maybe I'll write that. So we see a switching back and forth as we go between I and we. I and we. Oops, that should be there. And that should be there. So I and we. That's how So there's a switching back and forth between I and we. The framework that I'm going to use is in a certain sense what has been called Ken Wilber's integral theory, or the perspectival map, or part of his theory. And in it he has what he considers to be the 4 major perspectives that are sort of capable, that humans have the capability of. And they are I, we, and it. And something that's sort of, I believe, in a sort of emergent sense, what he's calling it. And that, I had a bit of I couldn't quite figure that out until, and I still, there's interesting things about it. And we will be pointing to that a little bit more shortly. However, there's a few other things about this map. This I and we, sort of above the line, faces to what he calls or considers autonomy. And below is collectives. So autonomy is kind of individuals, and collectives is sort of groups, right? And then over here, we have sort of essentially subjectivism, and then over here we have something like objectivism. Okay, what I'm arguing is that the 6-in-6 pattern is a fractal, and it goes all the way down and all the way up. And what I'm kind of arguing is that the first stage, or beige, survival, or instinctual, really took from essentially the Big Bang up into reptiles, approximately, at least on our planet. And why I say approximately reptiles is that the organism, its focus essentially up to a reptile is exclusively really on itself, its own survival. And in that sense, up until that point in the universe, things are radically fight or flight in the sort of traditional Darwinian sense. So we can just consider reptile, or maybe it's a Big Bang to reptile, equals beige. Now, beige is always there. In other words, it's a foundational structure of existence. And we're going to come back to beige. We circle back on it in a different way as we go. And you know, certain times in our lives we might be really beige. But we're not always beige. It's just certain times. And from about the reptiles to approximately great apes, the focus, the primary focus, is something like purple, which I'm calling belonging or emotional. Okay, so now we have purple and beige, but purple still went through a certain pattern of purple red, purple blue, purple orange, purple green, and it started with purple beige in the sense that when purple was emerging, it had to survive for its own purpleness. And then what I mean by that is its focus of emotion. It was using emotion, but its emotion could only serve its own survival. And then when it got purple, then you get sort of, in a sense, the real first care. Emotion used for other, down here, where purple beige is just emotion used for self, essentially. And then when you get purple red, you start to see emotional beings that are primarily power. So maybe, you know, with wolves you start to see that. I would go, yeah, approximately, you know, that, and then they carry into blue, which would be also probably, you know, doggish. Like, you might, I don't know, I can't think of a good power animal in the sense that it would be slightly more primitive than a dog. Because the next one really, purple-blue is where most dogs sit around, I think. And that's where you get the kind of group pack thinking. And then purple-orange might be either great apes, maybe dolphins, maybe early, well, yeah, different great apes would probably be in between purple-orange and purple-green. And then we get into humans. Now, humans also have this whole developmental process here too, and sort of red is what I'm considering to be human. So we move from essentially beige up here to purple down here. And now, so notice that beige itself had within it, so 1, 2, 3, 4. It had a beige survival, a beige purple belonging, a beige power, a beige sort of meaning. Now I'm using that lightly, but all of these a little bit lightly because its focus is in beige. It doesn't yet really understand those higher order systems, but they're there. They're expressing themselves. And then you start to get a beige overarching super system, which might be roughly reptiles or thereabouts. And then you start to get the swing to the we. So that's the movement from here to down there. So you get the connecting mode. And then you see the emergence of the new purple. And so with red, we've swung from essentially this primary focus on I, which was from the Big Bang to the reptiles, to the primary focus on we with emotions, which went from about the reptiles to the great apes. And then we swing up here, which is called it. Now, again, this is just a refractive pattern in the sense that now this being can actually hold the system somewhat as an object, that is to say, for one's own power. They're using the we and the I, and they can manipulate it like a tool. It's a tool maker, like the humans are. We have the power with our hands to manipulate and manifest power through that process. Then when we swing down, which is just emerging, this would be essentially what is the second tier. And it wouldn't, there would be, again, a 6-on-6 pattern within the second tier. The second tier would be yellow, turquoise, coral, indigo, and beyond. So when we swing down here, when we get down into this spot, then you go again. So yellow, which would be an I focus within the blue meaning-making structures. So I am trying to find meaning. This is where existentialism emerges. Green was primarily about the pluralism that we saw in the 1960s. Orange was primarily about industrialization. So this is in the mind realm, the individual mind realm. So this is about industrialization that we see in like the late 18th century, 17th century. Blue is primarily meaning and integration. This is where we see the early religious structures start, maybe about 5,000 years ago. Red was a system on power and control within the mind, which started probably about 12 to 15,000 years ago. Purple was about belonging, emotion, or what we would consider magic, the magician's mind, which maybe started 50,000 years ago. And then beige, which was, again, about mental survival, which would have been right up there, which would have been probably 100, maybe even 200,000 or more years ago. So we have been moving out of this it system, and we're now moving down into this one. We're connecting it through green. We're connecting it to the new higher order system. And then we're beginning with that into the movement, into what you might consider integrative survival. It's a blue order system, or similar to that, and it's focused on survival. So that is existential in the sense that you're trying to survive the meaning, but there is actually a danger in one's life within all beige structures in a certain sense. Then what we would move down to, maybe if all things go well, 50, I don't know how many years, but it would be the turquoise structure, which would be something similar in nature to purple, where there's a sort of emotion, sort of a magical quality, but here it's in a meaning structure. And then you go up here, and there's a similar relationship with red, which has an overarching system of what our whole mind was up there. So that there's a deep parallel with red to this order system. And then with blue, you get interobjective, or meaning, or meaning integration, which would be down there. The next system would probably in some way objectify the meaning structure. And then out of that, you'd get a connection to something that goes beyond this. And that would be just a whole mimicking of that fractal on a higher order level. And that would be putting us into an orange-beige system. And so it would go. Strangely, this pattern only goes up to 6-on-6, so it's not infinite. Although this whole thing could nevertheless be just one of the other higher order systems that we just don't have any clue what that might mean. Anyways, blessings.